The automotive industry is set for a revolution that will disrupt and reshape global business, threatening the survival of every organization. To make sure you survive and win in the new automotive game, Automotive Growth Expert Roberto Dal Corso has interviewed global experts from the automotive industry to identify the changes and the impacts that are coming to keep you ahead of the curve.
Good morning and welcome to the leading disruptive automotive trends from around the world. This morning we have a very special guest, Martin Hendriksen, Managing Director of Clear Strategy in Johannesburg, South Africa. Martin, welcome.
Thank you very much. A great opportunity. Good to be part of it.
Now, it's always great to speak to fellow South Africans who know the automotive industry, because I've been gone for a while. So, you're an amazing person from what I've learned in a very short time. And Martin, just to kickstart things a little bit, if I can, kickstart things in the automotive industry. Your background, you've been in the automotive industry for a long time. You've done a lot of exciting things. Can you give us a brief history of what it is you've done and how you got into the industry?
My educational background is in mechanical engineering, which is always a helpful fit. And in the early 90s, I started in a family business called AIT, which in those days examined the automotive aftermarket from a market size and trends perspective. And it was a document, quite a thick report we used to publish every year. We were supported by the OEMs, the component manufacturers, the alternative distributors. And basically, I provided them an understanding of how big the markets were, what happened and changed from year to year, and what we anticipated in terms of market trends. So passenger cars, commercial vehicles, pretty much an on-highway focus. So that was the kind of grounding in automotive market research, and with a strong focus on the aftermarket at that time. The AIT business evolved into a company called the Marketing Shop, which offered a broader range of services. So we had a PR division, we had an advertising division, we had a consumer research company. Anyway, long story short, I moved out of that business in 1997, and I started a Clear Strategy company. And Clear Strategy company operated on a broader front, so it wasn't as aftermarket focused. We got involved more in the new vehicle side of the industry, and we broadened into two-wheelers, into commercial agricultural vehicles, off-highway vehicles, so it's a much broader range of activities. And a couple of specialities developed in that business, one of them being a measurement tool which we use to provide feedback primarily to the vehicle OEMs on customer experiences in their network. So it's a video mystery shopping tool that we use to basically give the OEMs an understanding of what kind of return they're getting for their investment in the customer experience part of their business. So it talks to training, it talks to managing, it talks to mentoring, it talks to all of the inputs that they direct at improving and managing excellent customer experience. So that journey started 21 years ago. We work with all of the major OEMs, and we have worked with everybody over the years, some on a continual basis, some on an off basis. I think our longest unbroken relationship in that space is 16 or 17 years now, and I'm happy to say that that's with the market leader from the CSI and from a measured customer experience perspective. So we're not the silver bullet in that respect, but we're certainly part of the recipe that ensures their success in that regard.
Yeah, and
within Clear Strategy Company, we, as I said, offer a broader range of services. So from focus groups to high-level interviews to customer surveys, a whole range of different things. And increasingly, not only in automotive, although automotive is still the majority of the work that we do. A couple of years ago, we got involved with a global company called GIPA, GIPA. It's a Paris-based company, and they offer an automotive, they call it an automotive observatory, automotive trends observatory package in just under 40 countries around the world. And it does what we used to do in the AIT days, but in a slightly different way from a methodology perspective. And Clear Strategy company represents JIPA in South Africa. So we run a regular ATO study here, and that fits into their global package of the 40 different markets
Yes.
Around the world.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that in a very quick nutshell is where I came from, I suppose.
No, I mean, over your 21 years, I think you've had an immense experience, because as you mentioned, you started off from the trend side, you then expanded, the market into two-wheelers, into more marketing concepts along with that in terms of advertising, and now you've gone to even more towards the customer end user focused customer experience type of thing. So you're able to bring all of that knowledge and know-how together in one.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think it's helpful in understanding the current global trends and how those global trends are likely to impact the local market. So I've spoken about South Africa. For many of our clients, we work in sub-Saharan Africa, in fact across English-speaking Africa, and in fact for some of our clients in the French-speaking countries as well. So
okay.
It's hard to kind of say we're across the whole of Africa, but in reality, for some of our clients, we are. So, yeah.
You certainly would be covering a lot of the key markets in sub-Saharan Africa then.
Yeah, I think that's true to say.
Yeah. And over your career, I mean, what has driven your success? I mean, what would you put it all down to?
I think we're a small business. We're not an enormous company. There are 30 of us in the team, so it's not very big for a 21-year track record. What we've tried to do is keep it simple in a way, so we don't have outside of investors. The two of us that started the business still own it and still operate it. In market research, traditionally, the service that you're selling is really objectivity. You could dress it up any which way you like, but the objectivity is what we try and offer. And if you had to say or answer the question, what contributes the most to your success, I think it's trying to be honest to that provision of objectivity in a quick answer.
Yeah. So being honest and being objective is the best value you can add.
Yeah, and I think not that there's anything special about us in being able to do that, but if you think of it from a client perspective, they're unable to provide themselves with their own objectivity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no.
Really, often a good market research study and presentation or results presentation shouldn't be a revolutionary experience. It should be an evolutionary experience.
Yeah.
So, clients, if they don't know at all what's going on in their markets, that would be unusual. So often what we're doing is really just providing the scientific support and I suppose that the objectivity is the word.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any more complicated than that.
Yeah, and that fits very well in with the name of the company, because it's the clear strategy objectivity of the marketplace.
Yeah, I think we would have. Clear strategy is a bit of a mouthful. We would have liked to call it objectivity, but the name was already taken somewhere in the world when we started it. So
I'm sorry to hear about that. But Martin, just going back, I mean, you mentioned the trends earlier. So over your 21 years within the automotive industry, you must have seen a lot of change. What is some of the change that's impacting the aftermarket, or even just the automotive industry in general in South Africa today? Whether it's, the OEMs, the distributors, suppliers, and even potentially, the end users.
Yeah, I think over the years that the trends in automotive, you've got many little components of the automotive market. So you've obviously got the new vehicle side. Within new vehicles, you've got pre-owned vehicles. In the aftermarket, you've got service, you've got parts, you've got manufacturing. So there are many markets within the under the automotive umbrella, and I think it's fair to say that each one is different, although they are obviously connected and interrelate with each other. So it's important to understand that there are similarities, but there are also significant differences. And I think from a geographic perspective, if you look at the global situation, just by way of example, in Africa, often people think that Africa is an homogeneous market where each of the different countries are significantly different to one another. Yeah. So within the countries, you've got the subsets. Within the automotive markets themselves, you've got the subsets. I think that's one important thing from a background perspective to understand. And I say that as a precursor to comments on what's likely to happen from a global perspective in the automotive industry. So we're talking about disruption. We're familiar with the massive disruptions that the automotive industry faces. And I think that the question from a trend perspective, I suppose there are two ways to answer it. The one is, going forward, our view is that the global trends are going to impact South Africa as they would any other market, and also the African countries. There's a view in terms of the global disruption that Africa will lag and tag along. Our opinion is the opposite. We think that they will be most likely early adopters. Okay. Given that there aren't many of the hindrances in the more developed markets in the African market. So they will almost leapfrog some of the steps because they don't have the capital and the baggage to carry along with them. The reason that I'm saying, making some remarks about the global disruption or the imminent global disruption, in our opinion and from what we've seen, it's going to be the most significant trend disruption that we've seen since the beginning of the automotive industry, if that's fair to say. So to answer your original question, what trends have we seen over the last 30 years, 25, 30 years? We've seen the OEMs becoming more meaningful players in the aftermarket after having given, in a sense, all of it away. OEMs, not only in South Africa, but globally, are becoming a greater presence in the aftermarket. We've seen at a very broad trend level, the independent garages in the South African market come under a significant pressure from the OEMs and also from the organized fitment and repair chains. So the likes of your tire centers and your fitment chains, they've put the independent garages under significant pressure. And I think at a micro level, if you look at that dynamic that's played out over the last number of years, the global disruptions that are coming are going to shape those relationships up even more significantly. So the Internet of Things, the connectivity, all of those things will continually lead to a situation where your independent garages are under more and more pressure and under more and more threat. Mm-hmm. So at a very, very broad level, those would be on the distribution of services, or from a distribution of services perspective, those would be the trends. If you look at the distribution of parts, the OEMs again have become more aggressive in the face of competition from the independent aftermarket. The aftermarket in South Africa is quite stable and has been stable for a long time. So you've got large, mature players that typically control how things work. And then on an ongoing basis, you've got regional wholesalers that develop and evolve and try and break into the national picture. And that's been a scenario that's been playing out and repeating itself over the years. From a component manufacture perspective, South Africa's component manufacturing industry moved out of the dark years of apartheid, where we had a lot of disinvestment. We had local infrastructure that could pretty much service the entire fleet and the entire industry from a manufacturing perspective. And those businesses over the years needed to evolve and adapt to play on the global stage. And the ones that survive today are the ones that are successful in playing on the global stage. And there's obviously been consolidation in that respect over the years. And as a backdrop to the theme of the global disruption, we see in the news just this week that Tenneco has bought Federal Mogul. That kind of consolidation is something we expect to accelerate. So it would have an impact on the local environment, given that we have many of the major global supply players present here. So suddenly, from having Tenneco and Federal Mogul as two separate businesses in South Africa, they will merge. That will have an effect on how they do business with the OEMs on the OES side. It will have an effect on how they do business with the alternative aftermarket, and so on and so forth. So I think, in a nutshell, we've seen, from a trends point of view, we've seen the kinds of shifts that I've spoken about. But I think the real change is imminent. And I think if you look at the Tenneco Federal Mogul case as an example, and you look at other examples where, for example, Bosch have divested from their rotating machine business. I mean, Bosch has started an alternators around the world, and they've sold the manufacturing capability of that business, to other parties. I suppose preparing themselves for the disruption. The likes of the Bosches and the OEMs are not going to want to be left behind by what's coming.
Yeah.
And I think some of the things that we see now from a trend perspective are obviously preparing, these big brands preparing themselves for what they see the future will hold for them, and those will obviously have an impact on the local markets, not only South Africa, but in the rest of Africa, and obviously elsewhere as well.
Oh, I mean, you said so much and you gave me so much information. I got a whole bunch of follow-up questions for you there.
Sure.
I guess the first one, you mentioned that you saw South Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa potentially, leapfrogging some of the other countries in terms of, some of these trends. And you mentioned the trends, in terms of the OEM expansion, distributor consolidation, supplier consolidation, and digitalization. I mean, do you also sense that it's going to be a real thing, is going to be electric vehicles and autonomous driving for South Africa and for the Sub-Saharan African market one day?
I think the short answer is yes, but there is a but, and I think the but is similar to everywhere else in the world. So legislation is obviously a key issue that needs to be overcome.
How prepared are you to navigate the disruptive trends that are set to hit your business? Will you survive and win in the coming years? To understand your level of risk exposure and to help you avoid becoming a statistic of failure, take the free risk assessment here, www.dalcorsogroup.com, which will identify the gaps and how to navigate the risks. By taking the risk assessment, you get a chance to win a free 30-minute strategy session with Automotive Growth Expert Roberto Dal Corso. Roberto can help you identify an amount equivalent to 7% of your total annual sales that you are leaving on the table each year. To survive and win, take action now and visit www.dalcorsogroup.com.
Probably legislation and political will. So if you use the example of Norway, in Norway, if you own an electric car, you don't pay any tax on that vehicle, you don't pay any license fees, you can park it for free. Anywhere that the government can incentivize you to own an electric or a hybrid vehicle, they do so.
Yeah.
And half the fleet is electric or hybrid currently. They provide free or subsidized charging stations for the electric cars. So Norway has a significant amount of renewable energy on their grid. So at a government level, there's a strong push and a strong drive to create an all-electric fleet in Norway. If you couple that with what's happening from a technology perspective, so cost of batteries coming down, the cost of computing power for electric and autonomous vehicles coming down, the cost of solar coming down, the cost of sensors coming down, all of these cost curves are collaborating to drive the disruption. So the cost of mobility under an umbrella is going to come down significantly.
Yeah.
And there isn't any reason why South Africa or other African countries or any other countries in the world should be exempt from that benefit. So, you can survey consumers as much as you want, and consumers can tell you, well, their independence is important, and owning a combustion engine car is important for kids when they graduate high school, and so on and so on and so on and so on. But the offer of mobility is going to be so compelling that people are not going to be able to resist. And that's going to apply equally to somebody in the middle of Angola, somebody in Mozambique, somebody in Zambia, somebody in Johannesburg. It's not going to be different. And the service providers in that regard, I mean, I suppose the only real unknown is who these mobility service providers are likely to be.
Yeah.
Will it be the OEMs? Will it be insurance companies? Will it be new businesses? Will it be the Apples and the Googles of the world? Will it be a combination? This disruption is not going to eliminate innovation. In fact, in my opinion, it's going to cultivate innovation within a brand new framework with a brand new set of technologies and possibilities. So it's impossible to say, well, this is where we're all going to land up, because I think as this technology takes hold, the answer to that question becomes more and more impossible to offer.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any reason that Africa will be exempt from the disruption and from the revolution. If anything, if solar is going to be the power side of the equation, in Africa we'll actually be better placed for the amount of solar energy that we have. So.
Yeah, no, that is amazing to hear. So in some cases, you're quite right. We could well be leapfrogging some of, other countries in terms of early adopters of electric vehicles and going down that route, because it just all fits so well with the whole sub-Saharan African plan, if I can call it that way.
Yeah. I think that's true.
Yeah. I mean, another one of the things you mentioned earlier was, we've moved away from the dark era. Global manufacturers have come back into South Africa. They've invested heavily. What are the trends at the moment? Because a lot's been spoken about in the news here in Europe about the free trade zone being set up, and apparently a lot of the Chinese manufacturers have taken advantage of that. How do you see that phasing out or moving forward and progressing?
In South Africa specifically, we have one Chinese vehicle manufacturer. As you say in the news, there have been articles showing interest or indicating interest from others. In terms of component manufacture, we don't have Chinese component manufacturers here. I think from a medium-term perspective, certainly I doubt whether they will exit China. But again, I think the global trends talk to what's going on locally. And if you look at the South African aftermarket, what we've seen coming from a situation where cheap, lower quality Chinese product had a reasonable foothold in our market, we've seen the independent wholesalers consolidate their positions in that part of the market, primarily by providing private label brands. Mm-hmm. So private label has grown to the detriment of the cheaper imported product from China.
Yeah.
And my understanding of what's going on in China is that the manufacturing capability from a quality perspective is improving continually. So some of those Chinese manufacturers that are supplying private label demand in South Africa via the big wholesalers are also boxing for the likes of Bosch, manufacturing at the highest quality level for those premium manufacturers. So if you look at the local manufacturers in South Africa, or the global suppliers that are represented locally in South Africa, they're part of this big network. So some of them will be manufacturing here for the particular brands for distribution elsewhere in the world, some for local consumption, some for OES, whatever the case might be. And this has been a developing trend over the years. For the local suppliers or the locally based suppliers to stay relevant, they need to fit into the global picture. No one can survive on their own local geography, if that makes sense. And if you look for another example of this globally, the Australian situation is quite an interesting one currently, where the local component supply industry is adapting to a world where no vehicles are made in Australia anymore. So those suppliers are going to need to find their business in the local aftermarket, but also in the export market if they want to survive in the context that they exist currently or have existed over the last couple of years. So those would be some examples or some ideas and trends around the supply side.
Yeah, and I mean from the suppliers, let's call them suppliers, call them manufacturers. What are some of the big challenges that they are facing? I mean, we know the trends are there, but how does that affect them on a day-to-day basis? Then if you take a look at, whether it's the OEMs expanding or the consolidation that's going on.
Yeah, I think on a day-to-day basis, obviously they need to keep business as usual to supply the current demand.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look down the line and you say that, and this is a contentious statement, but technically you could argue at the one endpoint that the entire internal combustion engine fleet globally could end up being parked, much as the Volkswagen buyback vehicles are being parked in the middle of the desert. And the cost benefit of this disruption could be so compelling that if you bought a car last year, it's still going to be cheaper for you to park that and to use mobility services provided by a service provider in an autonomous electric vehicle. So it depends on how aggressive you're inclined to be in terms of your future picture of the world. To answer your question maybe in a more practical way, the suppliers are scrambling to be part of the technology revolution.
Yeah.
So in a sense, divesting from the nuts and bolts manufacturing, which is currently supplying the aftermarket, and positioning themselves for the autonomous driving, for the vehicle systems, etc., that will make up the future demand. So that's certainly true across all of the premium automotive component suppliers, the Bosches, the Valios, the Delphis, etc., etc., etc. Now there are many articles where they're making acquisitions in the new technologies and divesting from the more traditional technology.
Yeah. So it's certainly an absolutely changing market where, let's call it tier one suppliers, or the big brands are moving away from old technology, focusing on what is coming, what is new, but because of these mega trends happening in the automotive industry at the moment.
Yeah, and I think just reading between the lines, there's so much been written about global brands missing the boat. So if you think of Kodak having invented digital photography and then not able to capitalize on that disruption or revolution, I think you get the sense that the vehicle manufacturers and the component manufacturers are painfully aware that they don't want to miss out. They don't want to be left behind. They don't want to be the record producer that turned down the Beatles. They want to be part of the new automotive world.
Yeah, no, that is so true. But I guess one of the big challenges has got to be, internally within a major organization, because the trends are going on. You've got to be doing something. You have a vision of where you want to go, but I guess to actually execute that, it creates its own challenges, and potentially, you are missing the people, skills, or even the resources to make that execution of the strategy. Do you see something similar in South Africa?
I think, again, South Africa will follow the rest of the world, and I think that kind of friction, if you wanted to describe it like that, is definitely something that the big players are going to have to overcome. That the legacy effect, and I think it's not so. Those issues are relevant at a micro level, and they're also relevant at a macro level. So at the recent Davos World Economic Forum, Carlos Ghosn from the Nissan Renault Alliance, Mitsubishi Alliance, presented a paper almost bringing the attention of the global economic leaders to the fact that not if, but when the autonomous electric revolution comes to the taxi fleets of the world, the delivery fleets of the world, the world economies are going to need to be ready to absorb the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are not going to have work as a result of that. So it's not if, it's when it happens.
Yeah.
And these people are going to require alternative employment. And I think to look at it at a micro level for South Africa, you have to keep placing it in the macro position, and how are the macro trends going to affect the local situation and so on.
And from your perspective, are companies, governments, associations doing enough to try and foresee, that massive job loss and how we retrain and reposition people, or could we be doing more?
I don't know the answer to the question globally. I think in South Africa, it's not something that's been thought about or discussed or considered at all from what I've been able to see. So I don't the short answer from a South African perspective, I don't think anything's been done. And I think at a global level, where governments are participating or where governments are engaging aggressively in this topic, there issues, climate change and pollution issues that are running in the background. So the Norway example that I used earlier, the other obvious one is China. If China could flick a switch and get rid of their internal combustion engine fleet tomorrow and replace it with autonomous self-driving electric vehicles, they would pull that switch without blinking an eye.
Yeah.
And that's simply from a pollution, city pollution perspective.
Yeah.
So you would expect countries that face pollution problems and traffic problems and so on to be very early adopters, push the regulations and the legislation and the control mechanisms around autonomous electric driving through aggressively. And if you've got an economy the size of China's doing that, the rest of the world is going to be a passenger on the ride, because the industries will align themselves to provide that technology for China, and it will then be available everywhere else.
Yeah.
So how quickly it would take to roll all of that out, I'm not able to predict. But as soon as you've got early adopters on a technology that's very aggressively on a declining cost curve in terms of your utility everywhere in the world, it should happen pretty quickly.
No, that is certainly interesting. And I'm just going to change a little bit the focus, because I know, in one of our previous discussions, you mentioned about this new exciting project that you're looking at in Australia. Is there a possibility you can give us a high level, without going into too much details or giving any secrets away, of what you're looking at there?
From a specific project perspective, in the Nexus organization, the buying group, it's really a business development activity. So I do a little bit of work for them in terms of that activity. So it's not in terms of the global disruption again and the trends. It's not it's going to follow along as would the rest of the markets in the world.
Yeah. Okay, no, that is super interesting. No, I can only wish you well in that project. But Martin, just changing gears a little bit then. Outside of the automotive industry, what are some of the exciting passions that you have? Because I see some pictures of motorbikes in the background. They're motocross. Is that you?
It is. I was captured by motorcycles at a very young age. I think I fell in love with them the first time I saw them, and that passion has endured until today. So, from a recreational perspective, I'm a keen dirt bike rider. So I enjoy trail riding. I enjoy trials bike riding. Yeah, so that's a good way to get out in the fresh air and then enjoy the practical side of the automotive industry, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. And are you still actively doing some of that today?
I do, but not on a competitive basis anymore. So it's really just a good way to clear your mind of the week, because if you have any clutter in your mind while you're riding, it's not going to end well. So it's a good way to just get away from day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, I guess in some instances I almost compare it similar to my cycling, because you go away for a couple of hours ride and then people say, what did you think about it? And you go like, nothing. You don't have time to think. So you actually unclutters.
I've done a bit of cycling as well. So I started cycling to get fit for dirt bike riding, and then I got hooked into mountain biking. So I've done quite a bit of that as well, and I enjoy that in addition to the dirt biking too. So I can concur that it's a good way to clear your mind of the week's activities, for sure.
Oh man, this is fantastic. Martin, I'm sensitive of your time. I know you've got a busy day. I can only say thank you so much for being on. I've absolutely enjoyed it. Well, every time we talk, I've absolutely enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to catching up next month when I'm down in South Africa, and where we can spend some more time talking about this. I love this subject, and I see you're also very passionate about it.
Yeah, I think it's very exciting, and I'm not sure that I want to be around to manage or be managing the industry or being part of management in the industry when the disruption really takes hold. But I'm excited to observe how it will unfold, and yeah, thank you for the opportunity and for the chat, and I look forward to seeing you during your upcoming trip as well.
Yeah. No, Martin, thank you so much. Thanks again for your time, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you, Robbie.
Thanks.
I hope that you have enjoyed and found value in watching this interview. If you want to learn more about the leading disruptive automotive trends impacting the industry, check out www.dalcorsogroup.com. I encourage you to share it with colleagues that will appreciate great industry insights. Join us tomorrow for more experts from around the world.